Hello and welcome to another big picture presentation for EDET 630 Foundations of Educational Technology. For this big picture presentation, I am going to be presenting some specific information about two important concepts presented in Part 1 of the course notes, the concepts being learning and instruction. Now recall that there are four parts to the notes. There's an introduction to educational technology research, a brief overview, an overview on the practice of educational technology, and finally a section on putting educational technology all together. This presentation focuses on information that is presented somewhat in Part 1 of the course notes, an introduction to educational technology. Now, one of the important reasons why I wanted to present this information in big picture format is because I want you to be aware of how the goal of educational technology and the information that is being presented in the course notes fits into all of the other course activities. Like the course readings, for example. The course text presents at times some dry, dense, and pulpy information associated with our field, but it also constitutes a body of work that anybody who's a professional in the field of educational technology should be very much aware of. Recall that the goal of educational technology as a field of education is to improve the quality of learning environments. And the definition of educational technology as presented in the course text is associated with the study and practice of creating, using, and managing processes and resources for learning. And what this presentation is going to do is really focus on the bigger picture of the goal of educational technology, and that is developing and researching and evaluating strategies that can help somebody who can't do something well become a person who can do something well. And I have some examples throughout this presentation on reading as the skill set that people might learn how to do as a result of both formal and informal learning experiences. We will get started in examining the two concepts presented in Part 1 of the notes, learning and instruction, by, as I mentioned, focusing on reading. Now recall, from your own life, you recognize and understand that people come into this world and they have the ability to do some things, but they also have an inability, just being born, to do other things. Reading constitutes a skill set of language that is something that most people can't do the moment they pop out. But after a few years' time, reading is one of those language-related skill sets that many people can do. The learning experiences. And so, speaking of learning experiences, what are they? What are those things that constitute the experiences that can result in a permanent change in somebody's behavior? Well, in the field of educational technology, we tend to look at some specific external strategies that can influence and affect how well somebody learns what we want them to learn how to do. And some of those things can be characterized as an introduction, practice and feedback, review, reflections, scaffolds, communication and collaboration. This schematic is not in any way, shape, or form a roadmap of how somebody learns. It's simply a description of some of the characteristics that have been well researched that define what can help somebody learn how to do. And so we're going to begin then by looking at what learning is, and then we'll focus on what instruction is, or what those things are that exist in a learner's environment. Instruction can be defined as learning can be defined as the development of new knowledge, skills, or attitudes resulting from an individual's external interaction with his or her environment and/or internal interaction between new and previously existing cognitive structures. That's a pretty thick, heavy definition, but the bottom line is Learning is something that happens in the brain that results in somebody's ability to be able to do something that they couldn't do before they learned it. And you can only tell that somebody has learned how to do something if you can observe a permanent and persistent change in their behavior. I can only tell if somebody has learned how to dance well if I can observe them dancing well. Not if I can observe them explaining to me that they can dance well. I can only tell if somebody has acquired skills associated with positive attitudes towards a healthy diet if I observe them making choices based on a healthy diet. And I can only tell that somebody has learned how to, say, understand, and that's a bad word, unclear word to use, but to understand certain aspects of science if I don't somehow measure a change in their behavior associated with that understanding. So learners come into this world and they have existing mental structures, and as we indicated, learning is the development of new knowledge, skills, or attitudes that result from an interaction between existing mental structures in some cases and the external environment. Some of the characteristics that influence and affect learning that are internal to the learner include their general cognitive abilities and developmental levels, what personal learning styles they might possess, certainly what previous experiences they have had, and also what their motivational state is when they begin the task of trying to learn something new. Some of the external environments that influence and affect how well somebody might learn include the type and degree of interactions that are possible between a learner and their environment, what types of social interactions might be included in the experience, what components and conditions are included within the learning environment. That includes such things as practice and feedback and whether or not there's an adequate review. Again, what kind of messages are being presented and how abstract are they or how concrete are they in the learning experience? What types of motivational strategies are built into the actual learning experience itself? What are the amount and types of supporting mechanisms or scaffolding included in the learning environment at different stages and at different levels? And finally, and this is certainly not a comprehensive list, but there is one more that sort of supersedes them all, and that is, what is the overall learning context? That is a reference to all of those factors, what, when, where, how, and with whom a learner learns from an environment, and that would be the overall learning context. And so that's a picture then of some of the factors that influence and affect learning. Let's look at some of the specific things that constitute instruction. Now, instruction can be defined as the arrangement of a learner's attitude for the purpose of facilitating learning or for the purposes of facilitating changes in their behavior. And I'm going to use reading as my example again. Suppose you had an attitudinal outcome for somebody associated with reading, and that outcome was that you wanted them to choose to read the books of their choice when they had some free time. That's an actual skill, an attitude. It's something that people have to learn how to do. There are certainly other skills associated with being able to make those choices, and those skills would involve the actual skills of reading. But in just looking at the attitude, choosing to read, there are certain things that can be done in terms of the learner's environment that can facilitate the learning of that particular attitude. One of those strategies includes enabling the learners to identify instances in their own lives in which making choices are based on the attitude being presented. So just making learners aware that they have a choice of books to read is an important learning strategy. Another very important learning strategy when trying to facilitate attitudes is presenting examples of the choices that you're trying to get the learners to make, examples of those choices that are made by credible and attractive people who possess that attitude. In this case, these credible or attractive people are people associated with as role models. They're attractive and credible because they're famous and they're part of in some cases the learner's world. Other strategies include making the learners aware of the personal benefits gained by making those choices, and that can be modeled certainly by others. And finally, perhaps most importantly, opportunities should be provided that allow the learners to practice making those choices associated with the desired attitudes. And this is just a perfect example of a young reader being able to make that choice and being provided with feedback, most likely because of that choice. Hopefully all of this information has changed your attitude about the information presented in the course text, and it will get you, it will put in context everything that's presented in the course text. And as we continue throughout the semester, we're going to be revisiting the concepts of learning and instruction in everything that is done, both formally and informally in this class. And that is it for now. Until next time, I am Greg Sherman.